I mean, many of us aren't bankers or, deal in large sums of money or charitable giving. How does that affect us?
Drug dealers, that they're a prime target for banking records. I guess the thing that worries us at the ACLU is that we have seen these kinds of powers misused. We do know, anecdotally, that the FBI, some FBI agents have used the powers, at least with the national security letters, which we haven't talked about, but to gather information on their girlfriends or on somebody, a neighbor. I mean, this is the problem. Because it's secret, it's very difficult for us to know how these powers are misused. And especially when we had the gag order. Now, one thing that they did change was that the gag order for the sneak and peek kinds of things has been lifted, sort of. It really hasn't, quite frankly. But what it does is it allows the person who receives the subpoena to consult a lawyer. But they can't release the information for something like 5 years. So it's essentially still secret, and that's the problem. We can imagine, based on history, with this kind of infinite power, how it can be misused. And so we don't really know specifically how it has been misused, if it has been misused. Well, we know it has been misused, but we don't know the extent to which it's been misused on the average citizen.
David, do you have
Yeah, the money laundering provisions are actually by far the largest section of the original Patriot Act. And a lot of your freedom from, a lot of your financial privacy was destroyed long ago as part of the war on drugs. Including the fact that you have, like when you make transactions of, if you, say, write a check for $11,000, you do transactions over $10,000, that gets reported to a central federal database. That long preceded the war on terrorism. And likewise, it's a crime if you structure your things. So instead of depositing $12,000 in your bank at once, you intentionally put in $3,000 a day for 4 days so as to avoid the reporting requirements. But again, and the money laundering thing is huge and complex. The part that the Patriot Act added. We'd of course had money laundering laws for many years, and that seems to me like precisely the kind of complicated thing for which you would want to have. You'd want to get it right so that you can trace the financial asset money flows involving terrorists, and because they often use Sharia banking, it's a more complicated thing to try to look on, since they may avoid the conventional banking system. But that's the thing you'd really want to have, several days at least of hearings in the House Banking Committee, and then the Senate International Relations Committee to think about how this is going to work in connection with our international commerce, and have it done right, rather than having had this bill that was sort of stuck in Congress, and then, we're going to slam it onto the Patriot Act, and it's got to be done as part of that. There may well be good things in that, and that's a topic of complexity that I'm not an expert on. But it's the kind of thing where the process of the way laws are supposed to go through Congress, and fortunately in Colorado, the way laws are still really made, is a very helpful thing of actually having hearings and witnesses and debates.
I agree with that. I think one of the problems that we had was that nobody was going to seriously question the Patriot Act. Well, look at the name, USA Patriot Act. I mean, if there were ever a name that you could not really vote against after the 9/11 attacks, it didn't happen. It's not called the USA Patriot Act by accident. They went through some machinations in order to come up with a title that used The title of the
It's an acronym, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
it
yes.
is an acronym. So they all stand for a part, and I can't remember exactly.
Uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism.
And it's led to a bad trend of more silly,
those.
argumentative
Yeah,
acronyms
yes.
being used as titles.
And so how in the world could you vote against the Patriot Act? I mean, and how could you question what was in the Patriot Act? So there were no real hearings. There was no substantive debate about
Well,
the
there
Patriot
was some. They had some debates on the floors of both
They had
houses.
some. I mean, but really substantive debate did not exist when you look at what the bill itself was doing. I mean, if this should have taken months to get through, because it should have gone to practically every committee having to do with commerce, with judiciary, with the oversight, with civil rights. All of those committees should have had a piece of this bill.
Well,
And none of them did, really. So
right, it was judiciary only, really, and you're right. And of course you'd say, well, since we got attacked on September 11th, why are we going to wait till December 15th to pass something? And the answer is, it didn't all have to be done as this one omnibus bill. There were probably a lot of things that could have been passed
quickly.
by consensus
Yeah.
quite quickly. And here's one of the really good things in the Patriot Act: because of the CIA's bad record of domestic spying in the past, during Vietnam, for example, there was this wall that was built between the CIA and domestic law enforcement. So the CIA finds out something that might be useful to domestic law enforcement, they're just supposed to sit on it and not do anything with it. Well, suppose the CIA finds out these terrorists are going to blow up the Brooklyn Bridge. The Patriot Act had changed the law, so it says, CIA, you must tell the New York City Police Department that you've got information that somebody's going to try to blow up the Brooklyn Bridge. And in fact, because of that, a plot to blow up the Brooklyn Bridge was thwarted. Now, that's the kind of thing that I think Congress could have passed, and that's maybe one of the most vital things, is to get that intelligence moving more readily so we can prevent the crimes before they're perpetrated. That could have been passed in a week, and there were lots of things that could have been done. It could have been, we didn't have to make it take as long as, the California budget. We could have fast-tracked a lot of things, had the hearings right away, but done it in a more thoughtful way to make it better.
But Congress did not do that.
43 days
Yeah,
from September 11th.
to the passage,
Yeah.
right.
So defining a terrorist. Obviously, the war on drugs had a lot of influence on the crafting of some of this act. So did the Patriot Act redefine what a terrorist is in our country? Did 9/11 redefine that? I mean, we obviously had the World Trade Center bombings in '98, Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, how has the term terrorist morphed from prior to the Patriot Act to today?
I think there's a very broad definition, if there is a definition at all. It's somebody that's suspected of something. Quite frankly, I mean, I think it's almost that broad. It is, as far as domestic terrorism is concerned, that is a very broad definition. It includes people who try to influence government. So you have a rally against, or for immigration policies or something like that. You're trying to influence government. You could become a terrorist under the definition. And what I think what's worse is that you could come under surveillance even if you're not considered a terrorist. If you may have some connection, maybe, to something that they may suspect is going to lead to terrorism, you could come under surveillance. I don't think it matters whether or not you're defined as a terrorist or not.
Kathy, I think it is a little wide of the mark on this one. There are different places in federal law where there's various definitions that come into place, but the sort of core principle is that terrorist is someone who tries to influence or intimidate government by violence. And two observations on that. One is that that's an awfully broad definition.